I worked graveyard shift at a tomato plant in between towns in the Central Valley in California. It's pretty much nothing out there other than a few houses pretty far from each other with some dairies and open spaces. I used to smoke and I would watch Netflix or listen to podcasts in between rounds. There's literally no one out there at all. I worked there a little over 5 years and never did I see someone walk out there. Behind the guard shack there was an open field. I step out to smoke and I'm watching something in my phone. I hear someone talking and laughing behind the guard shack. I dismiss it as it's just the wind or voices carrying from the dairy down the road. I keep hearing laughing and giggling, so I decided to peek around the side. You have to understand, I grew up in an area that many would consider ghetto. Grew up around gangs, and then joined the military. I'm not saying I'm a tough guy by any means, but takes a bit to scare me. Anyway, I look around the side of the small building and didn't see much, just the open field. I take a drag from the cigarette I'm smoking and tell myself I'm hearing things. I hear giggling again and take a couple of more steps and I swear almost shit myself. I see 2 little kids in the middle of the field talking and giggling together. It looked like a little boy and a little girl no older than 7 to 10 years old. I'm wondering WTF is going on and how they got there. I squint my eyes to make sure I'm not seeing things. All this happened within seconds, but felt like an eternity. Like I said, I couldn't believe it. They were almost see-through and the clothes looked old, like early 20th, late 19th century clothes. Then I noticed that it looks like they only have a body from the waist up. Can't really see their legs. Just then they got quiet. They turned to look in my direction, almost like they realized that I was watching them. When they did that, they had no freaking eyes, just dark holes where their eyes are supposed to be. Once again, like I said, this all happened within seconds, no more than a minute after seeing them. I felt this cold feeling to my bones and seriously got freaked out and got the hell out. I threw my cigarette down, turned on all the lights, and closed all the blinds, including the front blinds, to look out the guard shack. Those blinds had never been closed the whole time I worked there. I was almost shaking and felt this uneasy dread. I said a quick prayer and started trying to call my wife to see if she would pick up. Once again, I worked graveyard, and this was only about 2:30 to 3 a.m. I still had half my shift. I didn't do a single round the rest of my shift until the sun came out. I called and texted my wife, but she was out. I tried watching something funny on Netflix or listen to funny podcasts like Joe Rogan. The whole time I worked there, I never before that or after that night did I see something like that. I tried to look up what kids with black eyes were, but just kept feeling the same way I felt that night and just let it go. It took me a while for me to process what happened that night and finally tell my wife, and she finally convinced me to submit it to a couple of the channels I used to listen to. They were Ermaker and Busta. Every time I drive by there, I always think back to that night. I want to start by saying until this day, I don't know if this was a ghost or not. I wasn't a security guard then, but I did almost all the duties as one. I worked as a manger at an event center, and it was my job to lock up, secure the building every day. Looking back on it, I wish we had security. It wasn't unusual for us to see the occasional spooky thing at this job. Lights flickering, stuff being out of place, but this was something different. It started with a few doors found unlocked by the opener. Naturally, as the manager, I got for it, and was told I missed these doors. Then it happened more and more frequently and still got blamed. Until one day my immediate supervisor found a door unlocked. However, I didn't work the day before. He had locked up himself. He gave me orders that day. Everyone was to stay in the office at the end of day, so him and I lock up together personally. So we did. Same thing happened. Next day I was for sure going to get fired, but my boss came to my side and said something was fishy and he'd quit if they fired me. Naturally, he saved my job, but we didn't know what was causing this. Until one day we found something under the bleachers, a tarp, food wrappers, snacks, empty bottles set up as if someone had been sleeping in there. We took pictures and went to our immediate supervisor. They still managed to write it off. Looking back on it, the girls would feel eerie walking through that area, and some didn't want to work alone. We never got a definitive answer as to if it was a ghost or someone living there. They even doubled down on writing it off the second we uttered someone could have lived in. I can only come to 3 conclusions. Someone did this on purpose to get me fired, a ghost, or someone living in there. Not the most conventional ghost story, but it was freaky not knowing who or what it was. I worked as a patrol driver for a research and development company. I would drive around in a crappy little patrol car in this big industrial complex. Most of my issues were with the regular old living locals, but I've had a few weird occurrences and have heard even more secondhand. Most of the buildings were relatively new, but there was an old brick building built back in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. As you can imagine, there was a lot of suffering and death in that building back in the day. We had a dedicated interior patrol guard, but when he was busy, I would sometimes be sent to alarms in the building. One night around 2 in the morning, I was sent to a motion sensor alarm in the mill building. I walked around for a few minutes until I finally found the source of the alarm. It turned out to be a dead sensor, but as I was leaving, my flashlight kept turning off. It wasn't dead, but it would turn off every few seconds. I hustled my way out of there, but I swear I heard footsteps behind me. The dedicated interior patrol guard has told me a lot of stories. He's worked that site from the early 2000s, and as far as I know, he's still working there today. He says every so often in that old mill building he'll hear a voice, see shadows moving, and twice. He says he's seen a man in a dark suit and a top hat, facing out the windows overlooking the river. He never responds when spoken to, and never seems to move from that spot. If you blink or look away for even a fraction of a second, he's gone when you look back. How much of that story is true and how much is an old man trying to scare the young new guy? I'm not sure, but I know it scared the hell out of me, and still does. The candles in the chapel would be left burning, intentionally I guess, was never told to turn them off or enter the chapel, but eventually would burn out on their own. I'd come back at 3 a.m. and they were relit. It's possible one of the retired Jesuit fathers came in the night to do so, but I was around and would have seen something, never figured out how. Night shift at the prep school? In the basement of the music hall, I was about to grab the drumsticks and bang on the drums for fun, but suddenly all the hairs on my neck stood up because I felt as if someone had yelled in the room. Although it was quiet, there was an energy like someone had just shouted, and I just blurted out sorry and ran up the stairs back to the safety of the light. Night shift at the prep school? Patrolling building 4, an older building than the others. It used to belong to the school district, but the company next door had bought it and used as a workshop/storage. Rounds every hour. It was a chilly November night around 2:30 a.m. You would have to walk through offices that led to a food pantry, then exit into the workshop area. As I'm exiting the pantry, I hear a loud motor kick on, and I was taken aback because it was an unusual noise. Been working there for a while, never heard it before. I went to the corner of the room and realized it was a pill-shaped industrial air compressor that had turned on. It was weird because to turn it on or off, there was a sturdy switch either on or off. I thought, oh well, maybe someone didn't turn it off correctly. I tried to balance it in the middle between on, off to test my theory, but it wouldn't stay. I unplugged it and got out of there. I didn't want to know, but it did freak me out. Since that day, I always felt creeped out in Building 4. Night shift at Fancy Road by Company, currently working at a site well known for its spirits and unusual happenings. Nothing scary to report, yet, although my training supervisor and I did hear a door slamming the other night, when no one else was there. She told me it happens from time to time. I worked 12-hour night shifts at an old library that was undergoing renovations at the time. This building was very old and was built in the early 1900s. The site office where we sat was in the basement, and it was very cold and dingy. I arrived early for my shift one night to relax and enjoy a coffee before the night began. One of the foremen sees me sitting in the office and says to me, "Did you know where you were sitting? They had to extract coffins from the ground before they built the library?" I never felt the same working there again after that. Apparently the site was a Covenant Catholic school before the library. A few nights after that, I would experience strange feelings like I'm being followed or something during my patrols. One night after finishing my patrol, I go back into the office in the basement, and not 2 seconds after I sit down, I hear a window break upstairs. I was so freaked out, I ran outside and walked around the building to see if anyone was around. Nobody. This was after 3 a.m., so it was very quiet around. Other nights, I would hear things fall to the floor. Just a very chilling experience working there. I've worked security at all kinds of sites and never experienced anything like that place. I work third shift security at a brewery. My first week of working here, something just felt off. I dismissed it as it being a new work environment, plus me being alone at night. There are two main buildings on the same property, the brewery and the bar about 200 feet away. The third shift guards hang out in the bar at night, since it has a good overlook of the facility. The lights automatically turn off and come on with motion. I was coming back from a patrol around the facility. The lights in the main room and the back room were off, but the door to the back room was open. I walked into the bar like normal, and the lights came on after I took a few steps inside. Then I froze. In that doorway there was a thing, humanoid, but not quite. Its arms were way too long, and its hair covered most of its upper body. The doorway was almost too small for it to get through. But after a few seconds, I blinked, and it was gone. Apparently, I'm not the only one who's seen it. After asking around a bit, a few of the day shift guys seem to know what I'm talking about, but most refuse to talk about it. Over the next few weeks, I had a few more run-ins with him, but only in the bar. I thought he couldn't leave it. One of the main public areas inside the brewery has a set of two doors, the outside and inside doors, kind of like an airlock. When you scan your access card after hours, the doors automatically open then close after about 30 seconds. The outside door has a tendency to get stuck, though. So I stood in that airlock space, looking outside, waiting for the door to close. The inside door closed first behind me, then the outside door closed. As it did, I see in the reflection the thing standing right behind me, towering over me, staring down, long arms hanging at his side. I no longer stand in that space when I wait for the doors to close. I go inside, turn the lights on, then turn around and wait for the door to close. During my time as a sheriff's deputy, I worked as a night guard for a local branch of a massive investment firm for extra cash, the 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. shift on weekends. There were only 2 guards on shift at any time. The facility was 3 buildings across a 4-acre property, gated, and on the tail end of an industrial park, on the border of a really rough neighborhood. One night, I was on guard during December, and a lot of the desks were covered in Christmas decorations and wrapping paper. The other guard was a fellow soldier with me in the National Guard, so we both knew we were trained and had each other's backs. Suddenly, my radio lit up, and my buddy told me the cameras in one of the cubicle areas were feeding black and he thought the lights went out. My job was to walk over there and reset the breaker and get the lights back on. I turned around and began to walk down the hallway. It was absolutely pitch black. No service lights, no door lights, no faint glow of computers left on, nothing. The air felt cold, and my flashlight felt darker than normal. Something wasn't right. My heartbeat began to speed up as I remembered the breaker room was all the way in the back, near the server, and I had to walk down nearly 40 rows of cubicles to get there. I kept hearing this odd, clicking sound as I began to slowly walk through the cubicle row. Suddenly, I saw a silhouette crouched down between 2 cubicles in the back. I pinged the radio twice to signal my buddy to get 911 on standby. I began to slowly walk toward it, issuing verbal commands. "Stand up, face me now." I yelled at the silhouette, wondering why it wasn't moving. As my flashlight hit it, I saw it was a clown statue holding a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. I laughed. My hands were shaking, I was sweaty, and I genuinely was happy I didn't have to use force or possibly take a life that night. I felt so relieved. I walked up to it, planning to move it back inside of a cubicle to get it out of our way. Suddenly, it lit up and laughed, "Bah ha ha ha," loudly and sharply. I took off running. The thing absolutely caught me off guard and scared the living *T out of me. Nothing scared me as much as that clown laughing at me, eyes and nose glowing red. I ran all the way back to the front desk and made my buddy get the lights on in there. I'm not even scared of clowns normally, but that one in particular would continue to creep me out for the rest of the time I worked there.